You know life has a funny way of testing us. It throws curveballs, builds walls, and sometimes it tries to shrink us down, make us feel small, especially when the world isn't ready to see us for all we are. We've all faced moments that bruised our spirit. Moments when we were dismissed, doubted, or outright disrespected simply because of who we are. But what if one of those moments, a moment of glaring injustice, became the very spark that ignited a phoenix, allowing you to rise stronger, richer, and more powerful than anyone could have imagined today? I'm going to tell you the story of Elijah Thorne, a man of vision, intellect, and profound dignity, a black man who built an empire from the ground up only to be publicly humiliated, thrown out of a luxury hotel purely because of the color of his skin. But what those who tried to diminish him didn't realize, what they couldn't possibly fathom, was that Elijah wasn't just a guest. He was a force. And by the next sunrise, their act of prejudice would not only cost them everything, but would hand Elijah the keys to a kingdom they never knew he sought. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a profound journey of resilience, a masterclass in turning insult into ultimate triumph. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or been told you don't belong, then buckle up. This story is for you. The afternoon sun, usually a warm embrace in the bustling heart of the city, felt strangely cold as Elijah Thorne stepped out of his sleek electric vehicle. He took a deep breath, the air carrying the faint scent of exhaust mixed with the intoxicating aroma of blooming jasmine from a nearby park. His eyes fixed on the towering facade of the Phoenix Hotel, its polished brass doors gleaming a testament to old money and quiet power. This wasn't just any hotel. It was a landmark, a bastion of exclusivity. And today, it was where his most pivotal business meeting was set to take place. A meeting that could catapult his tech empire to dizzying new heights. Elijah, a self-made man, had navigated the elite circles of Silicon Valley and beyond for years. He'd built his company from a dorm room idea into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, a testament to grit, brilliance, and an unwavering belief in what was right. Yet despite his tailored suit and the quiet hum of his expensive car, there was always an unspoken awareness, a subtle scrutiny that followed him like a shadow. Today, however, that familiar unease morphed into something sharper, a premonition that prickled at the back of his neck as he pushed through the grand revolving doors. The lobby of the Phoenix was a symphony of hushed opulence. Crystal chandeliers dripped like frozen waterfalls from the vaulted ceiling, casting a soft glow on marble floors so pristine you could see your reflection. The air hummed with hushed conversations and the clinking of delicate silverware from the high-end restaurant tucked away in the corner. Elijah's sharp eyes, trained to spot the smallest anomaly in lines of code, quickly registered the shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't overt. It was a chilling silence that seemed to ripple outwards as he made his way toward the reception desk. Staff members initially bustling suddenly moved with an unnatural stiffness. Guests, sipping lattes in plush velvet armchairs, paused their conversations, their gazes lingering a moment too long. It wasn't the first time he'd encountered such looks, a subtle, unspoken judgment based on nothing but the color of his skin. But there was something about this place that felt different. An underlying hostility, like a faint acrid smoke, permeated the very air. He adjusted the knot of his tie, a purely habitual gesture, to steady himself, and strode confidently towards the front desk. The receptionist, a young woman with a perfectly coiffed blonde ponytail and a practiced smile, glanced up. Her expression shifted, a flicker of something unreadable. Perhaps surprise, perhaps suspicion, as her eyes took in his appearance, lingering just a moment too long before she plastered on a forced brittle smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How may I help you?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral, yet edged with a distant, almost dismissive formality. "Good afternoon," Elijah replied, his voice calm and polite, offering a slight nod. "I have a reservation under the name Elijah Thorne. I'm here for a business meeting." The receptionist's smile faltered just imperceptibly. Her fingers began to tap a rapid, almost frantic rhythm on her keyboard, her eyes darting nervously between the screen and Elijah. He could sense her hesitation, a cold dread creeping into his gut. His instincts, finely honed from years of navigating complex deals and subtle power plays, screamed that something was off. After a few moments, she looked up, her smile still in place, but a tightness around her eyes betrayed her unease. "I'm sorry, sir, but it seems there might be a mistake," she said, her voice laced with an almost manufactured doubt. "Are you sure you're at the right hotel?" Elijah kept his expression meticulously calm, though a familiar irritation, a simmering indignation began to bubble beneath the surface. "I'm certain. This is the Phoenix Hotel, isn't it?" he responded, his tone firm but polite. He was no stranger to these games, this subtle questioning of his right to exist in spaces designed for certain types of people. Before the receptionist could reply, a man in an impeccably tailored dark suit approached. This was Victor Sterling, the hotel manager. His demeanor radiated an almost aggressive authority, but it was tainted by an unmistakable sneering arrogance in his stride. He barely gave Elijah a brief dismissive glance before turning his full condescending attention to the receptionist. "Is there a problem here, Ms. Clara?" Victor asked, his voice carrying a practiced politeness that barely concealed his thinly veiled disdain. Ms. Clara hesitated, visibly unsure how to respond, casting a quick sideways glance at Elijah. "This gentleman claims he has a reservation, Mr. Sterling, but I couldn't find it in our system," she explained quietly. Victor nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly as he finally turned to face Elijah, his lips curling into a condescending smirk. "I'm afraid we don't have any record of your reservation, sir. Are you certain you've booked a room here?" His tone was sickly sweet, as if he were speaking to a lost child who had wandered into a place they clearly didn't belong. Elijah maintained his composure, though his patience was wearing thin. "Yes, I am certain," he replied, his voice steady. "I can show you the confirmation email if that helps." He reached into his inner jacket pocket, already feeling the familiar weight of his phone. Victor's lips curled into a thin, humorless smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That won't be necessary," he said, waving his hand dismissively as if swatting away an annoying fly. "However, we do have certain standards here, and I must ask you to leave if you don't have a confirmed reservation." The tension in the grand lobby thickened, palpable and suffocating. Elijah felt the weight of dozens of eyes on him, silent accusations, assumptions, based on nothing but the color of his skin and his presence in this upscale establishment. He knew this game all too well. It was the same old script, just a different stage. "I have a confirmed reservation." Elijah reiterated, his voice firm but calm, holding on to a thread of dignity. "And I am here for an important meeting. Please check again." Victor's expression hardened, his facade of false civility crumbling. He glanced at the imposing security guard standing nearby, a silent signal. "Gentlemen," he called out, his voice taking on a commanding, almost theatrical tone, "please escort this man out of the hotel. He's clearly mistaken." The guards moved in two hulking figures, their hands hovering near their radios. Elijah felt his heart rate quicken. He had no intention of causing a scene, but he wasn't going to back down either. He reached for his phone again, intending to display his reservation confirmation, but the guards mistook the movement as a threat. "Hands where I can see them!" One of the guards barked, his voice echoing through the suddenly hushed lobby. A suffocating silence fell over the room, as guests turned to watch the unfolding drama, some with morbid curiosity, others with averted eyes of discomfort. Elijah could feel his frustration mounting, a hot surge of anger that threatened to break his composure. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he said, his voice rising slightly, fighting to be heard over the pounding in his ears. "I'm just getting my phone to show you the email." "Sir, we need you to comply," the other guard insisted, stepping closer, his hands subtly resting on his belt. Elijah could see the tension in their stances, the readiness to escalate the situation. Victor Sterling watched with a smug expression, seemingly relishing the power he wielded in this humiliating moment. "If you do not leave voluntarily, Mr. Thorne, we will have to remove you by force," Victor said, his voice dripping with feigned regret. Elijah took a deep breath, weighing his options. He knew he could press the issue further, but the situation had already spiraled out of control. They weren't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing him lose his composure. That would be a victory for them. "Fine," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface, a quiet storm building within him. "I'll leave." But this isn't over. As he turned to walk away, the guards roughly grabbed his arms, pushing him firmly toward the exit. Elijah stumbled slightly, his dignity bruised but intact. He could hear the whispers and snickers of the onlookers, feel the judgmental eyes boring into his back. His business associates, who had been waiting for him inside, watched in shock and disbelief, their faces a mixture of confusion and horror. Outside, the cool afternoon air felt like a balm on his burning skin. Elijah straightened his jacket, smoothing out the wrinkles left by the guard's rough handling. He took a moment to collect himself, his mind racing with thoughts of how to handle this blatant injustice. He pulled out his phone and saw that his business meeting had already been compromised. His associates were hesitant now, shaken by the public spectacle they'd witnessed. But as Elijah stood there looking back at the grand imposing entrance of the Phoenix Hotel, now tainted by the bitter memory of humiliation and prejudice, a new sense of grim resolve hardened within him. This was not going to end here. No. This was just the beginning. The world was about to see what happens when you underestimate a soul tested by fire. Elijah walked away from the Phoenix Hotel, the crisp city air doing little to cool the fire simmering within him. He was a man of action, a visionary who saw not just problems but solutions. And this incident, while deeply personal and humiliating, was also a glaring symptom of a larger systemic disease. He wasn't interested in just complaining. He was interested in changing the narrative, and he knew just how to do it. What Elijah didn't know then, but would soon discover, was that in the vast anonymous crowd of the hotel lobby, a quiet observer had become an unwitting witness. A young woman, a digital nomad named Sarah, had been scrolling through her phone, half listening to a podcast when the commotion started. Her fingers, almost on autopilot, had flicked open her camera app. She hadn't been looking for trouble, but as she saw a man impeccably dressed and undeniably calm being roughly escorted from the hotel by two burly guards, something clicked. The dismissive smirk on Victor Sterling's face, the palpable tension, the hushed whispers, it all screamed injustice. Sarah had captured the entire incident, a raw, unedited glimpse into a moment of blatant racial profiling, all on her smartphone. Within minutes of Elijah's forced exit, Sarah, still shaken by what she'd witnessed, uploaded the clip to social media with a simple, indignant caption. "Just saw this man, calm and composed, kicked out of the Phoenix Hotel for no reservation. Looks a lot like racial profiling to me. Hashtag the Phoenix. Hotel. Racial bias. Hashtag do better." She thought it might get a few likes, maybe a dozen shares. She was wrong. The video exploded. Like a digital wildfire, it swept across platforms. People watched the seamless, infuriating footage of a black man clearly distinguished being manhandled and dismissed. The comments section became a furious torrent, thousands expressing outrage, sharing their own harrowing experiences of similar discrimination, calls for boycotts of the Phoenix Hotel, and demands for immediate accountability. Hashtags trended, memes popped up condemning the hotel's actions. The initial trickle of outrage became a tidal wave of public fury. This wasn't just Sarah's video anymore. It was everyone's story. The hotel's digital presence, meticulously curated to exude luxury and exclusivity, was obliterated within hours. Their social media pages, once filled with glossy images of gourmet food and sparkling pools, were now flooded with negative comments. A sea of red emojis, one-star ratings, and scathing condemnations. News outlets, sensing the pulse of public outrage, quickly picked up the story, further amplifying the fallout. Local reporters thronged outside the Phoenix, demanding answers, interviewing guests and staff, those who dared to speak, turning a private humiliation into a very public reckoning. While the storm raged online and in the media, Elijah Thorne was already making his moves. He wasn't wasting a single moment stewing in anger. He saw the chaos not as a setback, but as a colossal, unforeseen opportunity. You see, Elijah was more than just a tech entrepreneur. He was a strategic investor, a man who understood the intricate dance of the stock market as intimately as he understood lines of code. He had always believed that true power wasn't just about accumulation, but about leverage. finding the weak points in a broken system and transforming them. The news of the Phoenix Hotel's plummeting stock value reached his ears less than an hour after the incident went viral. It was a golden, almost unbelievable opportunity. He contacted his financial team, a lean, brilliant group of analysts and lawyers who usually spent their days dissecting tech startups. "Change of plans," he told his lead strategist. "We're acquiring a hotel." The team used to Elijah's audacious vision didn't bat an eye. Within hours, they began negotiating a purchase. It was a whirlwind of frantic calls, hushed conversations with distressed shareholders, and strategic legal maneuvers. By midnight, as most of the city slept oblivious to the seismic shift underway, the deal was done. The papers were signed. Elijah Thorne, the man who had been summarily kicked out of the Phoenix Hotel just hours before because of the color of his skin, was now its majority owner. The irony wasn't lost on him. He felt no wild triumph, no sense of petty revenge, just a quiet, profound satisfaction. He wasn't just buying a hotel. He was reclaiming a space, a narrative, and proving a point that echoed far beyond the polished walls of the Phoenix. This was about turning the deepest insult into the most profound statement. It was about showing that the very prejudice designed to diminish you could, in the right hands, become the fuel for your ascendancy. The dramatic reversal was complete, hidden in plain sight. Victor Sterling, the arrogant manager who had reveled in his brief moment of power, was completely unaware. He had no idea that the man he had so casually dismissed was now the ultimate authority, the one holding all the cards. He would wake up to a world that had not only condemned his actions, but had also fundamentally shifted the ground beneath his feet. The stage was now set for a confrontation unlike any he could imagine. Elijah Hall stood outside, looking up at the hotel, no longer a symbol of shame, but a canvas for a new beginning. Tomorrow, he would return not as an unwelcome guest, but as the one who held the power to redefine every rule within its walls. The next morning, the city was just beginning to stir, painting the sky in hues of soft pink and gold. But inside the Phoenix Hotel, a far more profound awakening was about to unfold. Elijah Thorne stepped out of his car, the same model from yesterday. But today, every movement felt imbued with a different kind of purpose. There was no trace of the humiliation from the previous day, only a quiet, steely satisfaction that settled deep within him. He adjusted the cuffs of his suit, a gesture of precision, not nervousness, and pushed through the revolving glass doors. The lobby was still in its morning quiet, a few early guests milling about, but the air felt charged, expectant. As Elijah strode through, a hush fell. The familiar faces of the staff, who just yesterday had treated him with disdain or averted eyes, were now filled with a dawning shock, quickly followed by disbelief. Whispers like agitated bees quickly spread among them as they recognized the man from the viral video, the man they had dismissed, now walking with an undeniable air of ownership. He's back. But how? And why without pausing? Elijah made his way directly to the reception desk. Ms. Clara, the same young receptionist from yesterday, was there. Her face, usually composed, paled as she recognized him. Her polished smile replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. Her posture stiffened. Her previous arrogance replaced by a visible tremble. "Good morning, Ms. Clara." Elijah said, his voice calm, almost unnervingly so. "I need to speak with your manager. Now." Ms. Clara could only nod wordlessly. Her hands visibly trembled as she picked up the phone, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion, and called the back office. A few agonizing moments later, Victor Sterling appeared. His usual confident demeanor had evaporated overnight, replaced by a look of profound confusion and barely concealed anxiety. The smug expression that had been plastered across his face yesterday, the one that reveled in Elijah's public humiliation, was gone. "Mr. Thorne?" Victor began, attempting a polite smile that came off as nothing more than a forced grimace. His voice was laced with a desperate politeness. "What brings you back here today is there something we can assist you with?" Elijah smiled then, but it wasn't the warm, friendly smile Victor might have hoped for. It was the kind of smile that carried the weight of knowing exactly who was in control, a razor-sharp edge of inevitability. "Yes, actually, there is something you can assist me with, Mr. Sterling," Elijah replied. He pulled a slim, yet weighty folder from his briefcase and laid it on the reception counter with a soft thud. "These are the documents confirming that I am now the majority owner of the Phoenix Hotel." For a moment, the grand lobby seemed to freeze in time. The hushed whispers died completely. Victor Sterling's eyes widened first in disbelief, then in dawning horror. He looked from Elijah to the papers, then back again, his face paling by the second. His jaw dropped a grotesque tableau of shock. He reached out with a shaking hand, picked up the documents, his fingers fumbling, and quickly scanned them. This can't be right." Victor stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, laced with a desperate plea for it not to be true. "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Mr. Sterling," Elijah replied, his voice steady, calm, and utterly final. "I've acquired a majority share. As of now, I'm the one in charge." A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the lobby as the entire staff and the few bewildered guests processed what had just been revealed. Victor stood there stunned and speechless, his mind racing, trying desperately to make sense of the situation. Yesterday, he had been on top, secure in his authority and his unfounded assumptions. Today, everything had changed. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. "Mr. Sterling," Elijah continued, his tone firm, cutting through the silence like a knife. "Please gather all the staff in the main hall. We're going to have a meeting. A mandatory one." Within minutes, the entire hotel staff was assembled in the grand hall. Nervous whispers filled the room as employees exchanged anxious glances. The air was thick with uncertainty and a palpable fear. Some had seen the viral video, others had only heard rumors, but now it was clear the Phoenix Hotel was under new management, and the very foundation of their world was shaking. Elijah stood at the front of the room surveying the crowd. He could see the apprehension on their faces. People who had once held casual power and privilege, now reduced to uncertainty, their future suddenly precarious. He knew this wasn't going to be easy, but it was absolutely necessary. "Good morning." Elijah began, his voice carrying a calm authority that silenced the room, every whisper dying. "For those who don't know, my name is Elijah Thorne, and as of last night, I am the new owner of the Phoenix Hotel." A collective murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of gasps and stunned exclamations. Elijah let it settle before continuing, his gaze sweeping over the faces, some defiant, some afraid. "I'm sure you all saw what happened yesterday, or at least heard about it. What occurred in this hotel was unacceptable. Discrimination, prejudice, and mistreatment of any guest will not be tolerated here. From this moment forward." His words were met with a mixture of shock and apprehension. Some employees nodded, perhaps feeling a pang of guilt or shame. Others looked defiant, their jaws set in stubborn, ingrained resistance. "Effective immediately." Elijah announced, his tone unyielding. "Mr. Sterling, you are relieved of your duties as manager. Your conduct yesterday was inexcusable. You may collect your things and leave the premises." Victor Sterling's face turned a deep shade of crimson. He opened his mouth to protest, but one look at Elijah's unwavering expression told him it would be utterly pointless. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. There was no longer room for negotiation, no room for his baseless arrogance. He nodded stiffly, his pride visibly shattered, and without a word turned to leave the room, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Elijah then turned to the rest of the staff. "I'm giving you an opportunity. We are going to rebuild this hotel from the ground up. I'm instituting a mandatory training program on cultural sensitivity, equality, and respect for every employee from the top down. This isn't optional." Several hands shot up, but Elijah held up a hand to stop them. "I know some of you may not agree with this, and that's fine. You're free to leave if you cannot adhere to these new principles. But for those who choose to stay, understand that this is not just about keeping your job. It's about becoming better. It's about learning from the mistakes of the past and building a truly inclusive environment." A few employees exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear that some were struggling to come to terms with the new reality they had operated under for years, a mindset where certain guests were implicitly deemed less than roi, where their own positions felt untouchable. Now they were faced with a stark choice: adapt, truly learn, and commit to a new, unfamiliar ethos, or leave. As the meeting concluded, Elijah watched the crowd disperse. He could sense the undercurrent of discontent among some of the employees, a quiet murmur of resistance. He wasn't naive. He knew that changing a deeply ingrained culture wouldn't happen overnight. There would be resistance, perhaps even sabotage. But he was prepared. He had anticipated this. This wasn't just about ownership. It was about laying a new, unshakable foundation. Later that day, Elijah walked through the halls of the hotel, observing the staff as they went about their duties. He could hear the whispers, see the suspicious glances cast his way. Some of the older staff members, those who had been there for years and were used to running things their way, were the most resistant. They murmured amongst themselves, making vague plans to undermine the new rules, scoffing at the idea of cultural sensitivity as mere corporate jargon. Elijah knew that true change wasn't about simply issuing mandates. It was about fundamentally shifting hearts and minds, a challenge he was ready to face head-on. And he already had his first key hire waiting in the wings, Dr. Anya Sharma, a renowned expert in diversity and inclusion, ready to lead this monumental transformation. This was just the beginning of the reckoning. The days following Elijah Thorne's takeover of the Phoenix Hotel were tense, a living testament to the adage that change, while necessary, is rarely comfortable. The grand lobby, once filled with the self-assured bustle of managers who prided themselves on their status, now buzzed with a palpable uncertainty. Elijah's new rules hadn't just shaken the foundation on which this hotel had been built. They had shattered it, and the cracks were starting to show in every corner. The mandatory cultural sensitivity and equality training sessions began almost immediately. Elijah had brought in Dr. Anya Sharma, a diversity and inclusion expert whose reputation preceded her. She wasn't just a theorist. She was a practitioner with a gentle yet unyielding demeanor. These sessions were unlike anything the staff had ever experienced. Former senior managers and supervisors, many of whom had long believed themselves to be above reproach, now found themselves sitting shoulder to shoulder with junior staff in cramped meeting rooms. For the first time, they were forced to confront their biases, face uncomfortable truths about their past behavior, and listen to the perspectives of those they had often dismissed or overlooked. Dr. Sharma employed exercises that challenged their assumptions, role-playing scenarios that put them in the shoes of a marginalized guest, and open discussions where suppressed voices finally found their platform. There was discomfort, defiance, and awkward silence, but also for some, the first stirrings of genuine introspection. Elijah made it clear from the start, this training wasn't merely a formality. Every employee was expected to participate fully, and everyone, no matter their title or seniority, was now being evaluated on their willingness to adapt and learn. Resistance to these new norms would simply not be tolerated. In the days that followed, a significant shift in the hotel's staffing structure was implemented. Many of those who had previously occupied leadership roles found themselves reassigned to entry-level positions. Ms. Clara, the receptionist who had so coldly dismissed Elijah, now found herself working as a guest relations assistant, reporting to Mr. David Green, a previously overlooked black manager who had just been promoted. Clara struggled her forced politeness, thinly veiling her resentment at serving guests alongside the very people she had once looked down upon. But the most striking changes were seen in the behavior of Victor Sterling, the former manager. Stripped of his authority, Victor was reassigned as a concierge. This new role forced him to interact directly with guests, attend to their needs, and most importantly, practice the kind of humility and genuine customer service he had rarely displayed in his previous position. Elijah watched him closely, noting the subtle shifts in his demeanor. From the stiff reluctance of a man unused to being told what to do to the gradual begrudging resignation of someone who had no other choice. Every polite smile, every helpful direction was a small, almost imperceptible step in his slow, forced re-education. And then there was Mr. Henderson, the former head chef, a man who had once commanded the kitchen staff with an iron fist and a fiery temper. He was now on the cleaning crew. Elijah saw him one day, scrubbing floors and washing dishes, his once confident face now twisted with bitterness and frustration, his hands raw from the work he had once assigned to others. He mumbled to himself a constant commentary of discontent. Meanwhile, Elijah brought in new employees, particularly individuals from marginalized communities who had faced discrimination in their previous jobs. These new hires were given opportunities to lead, manage, and contribute ideas to the hotel's transformation. One of them, a brilliant young Latina woman named Maria, who had previously been a front desk clerk in another hotel, but had been denied promotion repeatedly, despite her exceptional qualifications, was promoted to head the new expanded guest relations team. She was tasked with setting a new standard for service and inclusivity at the Phoenix. Her enthusiasm was infectious, a stark contrast to the sullen resentment of some of the old guard. The old guard, the former managers and supervisors, found it incredibly difficult to adjust to the new power dynamics. They struggled with their diminished roles and the shift in authority. For some, the resentment only grew festering like an untreated wound. They whispered in corners, a subtle undercurrent of dissent. Elijah was aware of these murmurs. He had anticipated them. He knew that the system had to be completely reset. One day, Mr. Henderson, still bitter on the cleaning crew, was struggling with a particularly difficult stain in the lobby. He muttered curses under his breath, drawing exasperated glances from other staff. Maria, walking by with a stack of guest comment cards, paused. Instead of ignoring him, or worse complaining, she simply offered, "Chef Henderson, may I show you a trick for that my abuela taught me?" She knelt, demonstrated a simple technique, and without another word, smiled and continued on her way. It was a small act, almost insignificant, but Mr. Henderson for the first time saw not just a demoted colleague, but a human offering kindness. It was a tiny crack in his wall of bitterness, an unlikely ally in the making, realizing empathy wasn't just a word on a training slide. This spark of humanity, however, was not universal. A few of the most resistant former employees, led by a particularly bitter former executive chef, not Henderson, who was slowly changing, but another senior figure who had been demoted, began to actively plot behind closed doors. They whispered about bringing Elijah down, filing anonymous complaints with labor boards, or even staging a mass walkout. Elijah, always one step ahead, was aware of these murmurs. He called a private meeting with these disgruntled employees. "I know some of you are unhappy with the changes." Elijah began, his voice calm but firm. "You feel like you've been demoted or disrespected. But ask yourselves why you feel that way. Is it because you've been treated unfairly? Or is it because you're finally being treated equally?" The former executive chef, unable to contain his frustration, blurted out, "This isn't what we signed up for. You can't just come in here and turn everything upside down." Elijah's eyes met his, calm yet unyielding. "Actually, I can. And I did. Because what this place was built on wasn't right. I'm offering you a chance to be part of something better. But that's up to you. You can choose to grow, or you can choose to go." The room fell silent. It was clear that Elijah was not going to back down. He had no interest in compromising with those who were unwilling to change. His message was clear: while empathy was crucial, active sabotage would not be tolerated. As the days turned into weeks and then into months, the Phoenix Hotel underwent a profound transformation. The once rigid hierarchy began to crumble, replaced by a more inclusive and dynamic structure. The new employees, especially those who had faced discrimination elsewhere, flourished in their roles. Their fresh ideas and enthusiasm breathed new life into the hotel. Guests began to notice the difference. The energy in the hotel was palpably different, more welcoming, more authentic. People started talking about the Phoenix as a symbol of change and progress. Positive reviews began to surface online, commending the hotel's newfound commitment to diversity and equality. The crucible was hot, forging a new identity for the hotel and its people. But the most significant test, the ultimate moment of truth, was yet to come. It would arrive unexpectedly for the man who had set this entire journey in motion, a moment that would change him forever. The Phoenix Hotel, once a monument to exclusionary luxury, now pulsed with a vibrant, inclusive energy. The crucible of change had done its work not by destroying, but by refining. The initial hostility and resentment had for many slowly given way to uneasy acceptance, and then, for a remarkable number, to genuine understanding. The ultimate moment of truth arrived unexpectedly on a bustling Tuesday afternoon. Victor Sterling, the former manager, now demoted to a concierge role, stood behind the reception desk. He still carried a subtle air of world weariness, a faint echo of his former arrogance. But he moved with a practiced humility. As he greeted a family approaching the desk, a black couple with their 2 young children, his breath hitched. The scene was eerily familiar. The mother, elegantly dressed, carried a small designer handbag. The father, a tall, distinguished man, held a confirmation email on his phone. It was a mirror image of the incident with Elijah, but the roles were now reversed. Victor felt a jolt. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for their keycards. He could see the family's subtle apprehension, the way the mother's eyes scanned the lobby, a barely perceptible guarding of their space. He remembered Elijah's calm insistence, his dignity, and then the raw humiliation. In that moment, Victor didn't just see a family checking in. He saw himself through their eyes, saw the fear and uncertainty that he had once inflicted on others. The weight of his past actions, the countless microaggressions, the dismissive gestures crashed over him. "Welcome to the Phoenix Hotel," Victor said, his voice a little rough but genuinely sincere. "If there's anything at all you need during your stay, please let me know." The family smiled a genuine, relaxed smile and thanked him. For the first time, Victor understood. It wasn't just about equality in words. It was about experiencing it, living it, feeling it in action. It was about making people feel truly seen, truly welcomed. That evening, a rare humility guided Victor's footsteps to Elijah's office. His posture was no longer stiff with pride, but rather humbled. He knocked softly. "Mr. Thorne." Elijah looked up from his desk, a knowing look in his eyes. "Victor, come in." Victor stepped inside, took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I think I'm starting to get it," he said quietly, his voice raw with a sincerity Elijah hadn't heard from him before. "I never realized how much I took for granted, how much I looked down on people, how many times I made others feel invisible. I'm sorry. Truly sorry." Elijah nodded, sensing the profound authenticity in Victor's voice. "It's not easy to change, Victor," he replied, his voice soft, almost compassionate. "To dismantle years of ingrained thinking. But recognizing it is the first and often the hardest step. If you're truly willing to learn, truly willing to be part of something better, you have a place here." One by one, other staff members began to follow suit. Ms. Clara, witnessing Victor's transformation and seeing the positive impact of Maria's patient guidance, found her own quiet redemption. She began greeting every guest with a genuine warm smile, her eyes finally meeting theirs without judgment. Mr. Henderson, the former chef, after his quiet moment of connection with Maria, and witnessing the blossoming culture, found new purpose in his role. He still cleaned, but with a different pride, often sharing a knowing nod or a helpful tip with newer staff. The subtle resistance, the whispers of discontent, mostly gave way to understanding. Those who couldn't adapt, who clung stubbornly to their old prejudices, quietly left. But those who stayed transformed became advocates for the new vision. By the end of the 3rd month, the Phoenix Hotel was no longer just a place of luxury. It was a beacon. It was a place of learning, growth, and indeed redemption. The transformation wasn't just in its policies, it was in its people. It was a profound, almost spiritual shift. The staff moved with a newfound cohesion, an unspoken understanding of mutual respect. Guests, many drawn by the hotel's inspiring story, spoke not just of its amenities, but of its unparalleled atmosphere of genuine welcome. The positive reviews online were no longer just about the food or the rooms, but about the feeling the hotel evoked, a feeling of belonging, of being truly valued. Elijah Thorne stood in his corner office, looking out over the bustling city below, a serene expression on his face. The journey had been long and challenging, filled with unforeseen battles and deeply personal confrontations. But he knew it was only the beginning. He hadn't set out to seek petty revenge. He had set out to build something better, to use his resources not to tear down, but to elevate. And as he watched the Phoenix Hotel come to life in ways he had only dreamed of, he knew he had succeeded. The old system built on outdated prejudices and silent assumptions had crumbled. But from its ashes, a new order had taken shape, one built on respect, equality, and justice. And in this new order, there was no room for the insidious, soul-crushing weight of prejudice. The Phoenix Hotel had found its new chapter reborn and radiant. And so had everyone within its walls, including the man who had been unjustly cast out, only to return as its guiding light. This wasn't just a business success story. It was a testament to the enduring power of dignity, the transformative force of empathy, and the undeniable truth that true power lies not in asserting dominance, but in building bridges of understanding. The journey wasn't over, but the foundation was solid, and the future for the Phoenix and all who passed through its doors looked brighter than ever before. This story is a testament to the fact that when we face adversity head-on, when we refuse to let prejudice define us, we can not only overcome, but truly transform the world around us. Your resilience is your superpower. If you're out there, a black man or woman navigating spaces that weren't built for you, facing microaggressions or blatant disrespect, remember Elijah. Remember that your response to injustice can be your greatest power. You have the ability to transform pain into purpose, to turn exclusion into extraordinary inclusion. Don't let anyone dim your light or tell you where you don't belong. You belong wherever your vision, your talent, and your spirit take you. If Elijah's story resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of hope or a fire of determination, then do us a favor. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. Join our community of listeners who believe in the power of overcoming in the strength of spirit, and in stories that truly change lives. Let's continue to elevate these narratives together. Because every single one of us has the potential to be a phoenix rising from the ashes, stronger and more brilliant than before.